Is our technology advancing faster than we can adapt to it? Just how misguided is the techno-capitalist West and the species at large? Does our language evolve faster than our capacities to use it wisely? Alright, these are some pretty big questions, and this is going to be a very challenging video, but stick around towards the end, and I'm going to be providing some strategies on how to live your best life and thrive in this very complex world. So over the past few years, I've been working with some diagrams to depict the various types of superorganisms that are at play in our ecological systems and in our species at large. One of these diagrams looks like the following. So here we have our rate of advancement, and here we have time. Now we can set this at around 300,000 years. And at this point, we've made pretty significant progress in our species' cognitive capacities and our problem-solving abilities. So we'll start off around here, let's say. And as we go along, over the next 300,000 years, it kind of advances at a very slow rate of genetic adaptation and learning. Now, let's add to this technology. We'll depict technology in red. Technology has been going alongside this with us, helping us advance, and compromising us and giving us advantages over the years. And then somewhere around the agricultural revolution, let's say at around 1200 years, technology began to really start accelerating. And then we hit a digital revolution, and it's kind of been exponential like this. Now, we don't know if this is exactly how this works. We don't know if this line's going to keep going straight up like that. We don't know if that line is advancing exponentially like I've depicted. We do know that Moore's law is not what we used to think it is, that our ability to store memory and advanced computers is not doubling every 2 years. That was the case for a few decades, but it seems like we're reaching some boundaries when it comes to just how small we can make a microchip. But this does seem to be how a lot of people are thinking about this right now. It's as if technology and innovation itself is this kind of superorganism that's riding along our own human collective superorganism, and we're in a race to see which will win. If technology wins, we face a singularity wherein we might upload ourselves to the digital cloud in the sky, or we put ourselves into robotic bodies to preserve our egotistic desire to live forever. But it doesn't seem to be that simple. There's 8 billion of us on this planet, and we're probably all going to take different paths. Those living in the tech-heavy nations will likely take the uploading route, or choose to cryogenically freeze themselves if the uploading option doesn't come about in their lifetimes. Others will take the longevity extension route in hopes of hitting longevity escape velocity, wherein people are relying on biotech and biohacking innovations to help gain more years. The idea is that as each new breakthrough occurs, they gain another year, and then another 2 years, and another 5 years, and so on and so forth. And all this seems to be very Western, individualized conception of permanence, a crystallized and non-changing identity that must forever remain rigid and fixed. Of course, there will likely be human purists who decide to take the path of the Amish and remain wary of technology, slowly and carefully adopting it over time, and being very decisive and deliberate in their implementation. For instance, the Amish do use power tools, and they use computers to access the internet so they can sell their wares online. But they do remain wary of how their cultures might be swayed, how they might be drawn away from their own truest selves and the human in its most natural form. All this being said, I think there might be a crucial factor missing in my diagram: neuroplasticity. Our brains and bodies are very adaptive, and we can adjust and thrive in various situations. And our technology isn't wholly a superorganism separated from us. We use it to advance our capacities in many different ways. What this black line seems to depict is our species' natural genetic ability to act as what's called general processing systems, or general problem solvers. This is a term that's used in cognitive science to describe how we've carried this ability to use tools and view abstract objects in abstract spaces and kind of assign meaning in different ways. And we're very skilled at this. We're very good at coming to what John Vervaeke calls relevance realization. We realize the relevant solutions to the problems that we're facing, and we use various tools to accomplish that. We have neuroplasticity going on that can advance just as fast as this. So as our technology goes along, we have this ability to increase our neuroplasticity alongside that, and indeed transcend the limits of our past and become a better species, essentially. So we can also think of this green line as our information and knowledge. Now, of course, there's a difference between knowledge, information, and wisdom. As Dennis McKenna says, we are very clever, but we aren't very wise. But I do believe that might be changing as well as new opportunities for learning advance and expand. We don't only possess the skills of hunter-gatherers, but nomads as well. Now, we aren't doubling our processing capabilities every 2 years like we see insinuated in Moore's law, but we are able to use technologies like AI to create better technologies and find new ways to distribute resources more fairly and ideally create peace between nations. We're already using these as secondary psychologists, or as counselors or mentors or tutors. They're bringing us a lot of benefit to teachers themselves as well, and to psychologists. We're also making major breakthroughs in medicine, which will help both physiological, somatic medicine, and psychiatric medication. We now have access to a tireless professor in our pockets at all times, whereas a few years ago we had access to Google and all of the world's knowledge, but that still required effort and a desire to go out and search for those results. And now we're more encouraged to have natural conversations with AI that help us inspire creativity and a solution-focused mindset. And I hold confidence in this because we are such a language-based species. We use words to understand our reality and compare those with the words of others to expand our perspectives. And now we don't have to wait for the opportunities to speak with other people. Now we have an individual that we can speak with at all times. This may take a few years for people to get used to and considering it as a kind of a friend, or as a second professor, or as a tutor or a mentor or whatever, but I see this being adopted quickly right now, especially in the community of individuals that identify as neurodivergent and those that are struggling with psychological health. It's so good to be able to have someone or something to talk with at all times. We'll be discussing this more in the future on my series called How to Live Your Best Life in the Age of AI. We have this potential to become our best selves, not just well-informed and clever, but indeed wise. We're in a transitory phase where we must continue to meet the demands of this world while holding hope and confidence in a better tomorrow. Alright, let's take a brief look at our species' history. Some folks describe us as hunter-gatherers of the 21st century. We spent about 2 million years as Homo erectus, living nomadically and moving to where food was abundant and weather and terrain was livable. And then we spent another 300,000 years as hunter-gatherers, and only really developed agriculture and post-agricultural civilizations in the past 12,000. We developed education systems only over the past couple thousand years, and we formalized this education system into an ever-accelerating system of standards. Over the past few decades, we've held increasing expectations to learn more complex math and science at an increasingly younger age. Fifth graders are learning what high schoolers learned 50 years ago, high schoolers are learning what college graduates learned, and so on. Of course, there's two ways to look at this. It could be viewed through a kind of a victim mindset, or a perspective that this is not fair, that we shouldn't be creating these standards. But we're still seeing people graduating at the same rates. We're still seeing people be successful and thrive in these environments. So this adds credence to my theory that as we increase our technologies and our skills and our innovations in the ways that we teach, we increase our cognitive capacities, and indeed our species at large is kind of advancing its own cognitive capabilities. Now, regarding agriculture, the argument is that technologies like agriculture emerged out of necessity, and we were pushed to take on meaning systems when it came to what we consider tools to serve our purposes. As Daniel Schmachtenberger emphasizes, we lost our connection to animals the moment that we yoked the ox. We began to view it as a beast of burden. And the early Eastern philosophies went another direction with ahimsa Jainism, wherein we viewed animals as having spirits and being equals with us. And this is one example of how technology might work like its own superorganism, and we have to mindfully choose how we interact with it. We could say that we're expecting people to meet the standards of this overly stimulating and overly demanding culture, and align with these standards of learning. We seem to be approaching this next version of our species, the Homo Deus, as Yuval Noah Harari puts it. And when we fail to align with these social standards, which no one individual made up consciously, we call those mental disorders, or other people call them immaturity. And it does seem that left-leaning politics gravitates towards the mental disorder terminology, and right-leaning politics thinks of all of this as self-victimization. Denying legitimate disorders is a lack of social maturity or resilience, social awareness, personal ownership, self-actualization, and so on and so forth. This seems fueled by the musings of Jordan Peterson and the conservative propaganda mill, the Daily Wire. But that's a topic for another video, and I'm actually planning to do a series on these as well. And not to get into this too much, this isn't exactly the topic of this video, but this is regarding the United States culture wars, which is being seen in other nations as well. And a lot of this seems to come from the assumption that people should just be able to align with society at whatever stage of development that it's in. That everyone should be able to keep up in school and have good relationships, which commits what's called the false equivalence fallacy, where we assume that all brains work the same. This idea that one can develop a deep introspective capacity naturally, that one can automatically know to check oneself before one wrecks oneself, which is also not how brains seem to work. And of course, the mirrored opposite takes place on the left, where we're admitting that society is corrupt, that we need validation and accommodation for these struggles, emphasizing that technology and society have complexified beyond standards that we should be expected to adhere to. The idea is that we're pushing people too hard, and this is very true in many ways. But of course, this also commits the false equivalence fallacy in the idea that we have a standard for how all brains can go awry, how all brains can enter mentally disordered states. So we diagnose people with great confidence, and the layman adopts psychological diagnostic terminology to understand their reality, and we deny the need to align with society, at least to some degree. So all this being said, what do you think are the healthy parts of society that we should be expected to align with and adapt to? And what are the unhealthy parts? Let me know in the comments. Now, it's true, both the left and the right guide themselves under these adopted systems of labels. We are, as Wittgenstein said, bewitched by language. We adopt terminology without truly questioning the intention and the underlying meaning of the words that we use. This is exemplified in the fact that we are always surprised to learn the etymology. This is exemplified in the fact that we're always surprised when we learn the etymology of a word. So perhaps we should add another line to this graph, the rate of language expansion. Now I want to assume that this is not expanded at the rate that we see technology expanding. This is probably in an exponential curve, as we've described, but it's probably not at such an exponential curve. There are various depictions of art and cave paintings and various instruments dating back to about 60 to 70,000 years ago. But we can't say that people were speaking back then. Now there are proposals by various linguists that assume that once we got music, we probably had language as well, due to what's called prosody. Prosody is the sing-song aspect of our inflection, where our voice is going up and down to make various sounds. Those are notes. That's how we kind of put inflection and emphasis on certain words. And there are many other ways to look at this too. I'm not going to get into this in that much detail in this video, but the idea is that we probably had that around, let's say, 60,000 years ago. And that was probably also quite rudimentary, and then that also probably started expanding more over the recent years until today. This is today, by the way. Language has increased exponentially over the past few centuries. In the 19th century, we saw an average of 300 to 1,000 words being added each decade. Now it's about 300 to 1,000 every year. And some of these terms are more useful than others. We have words like gaslighting and masking, rejection-sensitive dysphoria, pathological demand avoidance, microaggressions, grind culture and Riz, and consumer culture. It's interesting, some people view the internet itself as an additional superorganism, as if the amalgamation of all social media platforms is creating a mind of its own, and we unquestioningly interact with it. And as we do so, it continues to influence the way that we behave and view others and view ourselves. And this seems very much the case when we look through the lens of large language models, where they hoover up all of the available data and process it into some kind of self-perfected blend of all the ways that humans can speak. Well, I should caveat that this is heavily biased towards English because that's the most widely digitized and available language. I digress. Alright, I want to talk a little bit more about how this applies to politics, and then we'll close this video out. It's easy to see how all of this applies to politics. Many see the overstimulating and overly demanding culture of capitalist nations. Many see the overstimulating and overly demanding culture of capitalism and realize that we are all cogs in a machine, that greed rules, and technology helps to make rich people more rich. AI systems are primarily being used to put more money into the pockets of the rich than the poor. Self-serving biases abound in Silicon Valley. The capitalists are operating under an outdated paradigm of production for the sake of production, and this is no longer working. We aren't really increasing our GDP, nor our quality of living. We're just creating more escapist toys and entertainment in our consumer culture. The very useful 640 diagnostic terms in the DSM-5 are now being used to describe how we are a victim of this society, and it makes sense. Modern-day civilizations aren't very civil. Everyone is charging as much as they can to the extent that people will not become homeless or starve. This is very much true for landlords and the majority of companies in general, it would seem. Our society seems balanced in a way that it simply does not serve everyone. And that being said, that's kind of always been the case. We have yet to see a social system where everyone's needs are met, everyone's food and water and everything is managed to the degree that it needs to be managed. 6 in 10 United States citizens have less than $500 in their bank account. And this could lead to homelessness. It also leads to people having to eat highly processed foods, because that's all they can afford. This increases anxiety and increases upregulation of glucocorticoid production, which doubles up that anxiety in kind of a loop, which leads to gastrointestinal issues, which sends people off to the doctors, who also benefit from our American sick care system. And most citizens are now painfully aware of how they're being taken advantage of thanks to the internet. That being said, the internet is also increasing our ability to talk about these issues and form unions, form movements, and activism to remedy these situations. And we do live in a consumer culture with misguided meaning structures. We live in the having mode instead of the being mode in many cases. We have sex instead of being in love. We have digital experiences and earn trophies instead of having real achievements in life and setting real goals. We have fancy cars and houses instead of being present in the moment with our community, being one with our common unity or community. All this being said, I do believe we're beginning to heal. All of these issues are being explored in more detail than ever. Efforts to bring communities together are blossoming, and the same technology that tempts us towards bad habits may be used to help us reach our potential. Technology, and especially digital technology, is the greatest double-edged sword we've ever had. And again, going back to this idea of paradoxes and infinities, there are infinite ways to use it for good and infinite ways to use it for bad. So I want to encourage you to use it for good in as many opportunities as you can. Take action where you can and be the change that you want to see. Now, I want to end this video on a positive note, so let's depict one more graph. Same deal here, rate of advancement over time. Here is our genetic evolution just steadily trucking along. Here we'll depict the rise of human intelligence, creativity, self-awareness, and ability to solve our own problems. We will depict this as such. That's been going along, and it's probably been increasing and increasing like so. Now, why would I depict it like this? Why does it also have this exponential curve here at the end? Well, as I said before, this is increasing along with our technology. So as our technology advances, especially with artificial intelligence systems and large language models, we have the ability to help ourselves like we've never done before. This is showing great promise in psychology and in philosophy and in general understanding of medicine and engineering and computer engineering and just about any human task. Now, there are various problems with this, and I'm sure you've seen other videos where people are depicting other kinds of graphs and rates of change and influences and unintended side effects of the technologies that we're creating. But from what I understand, and from the thousands of videos out there about this and thousands of books written about this, we see thousands of different ways to look at the way that the future is going to go. This is why I choose optimism. And in other videos, we've talked about this through the lens of what I call the liberation of the infinite. When you have infinite variables at your disposal, when you have infinite possible futures, it's probably in your own best interest and your mental health interest to choose optimism, or to choose a perspective that behooves you. This is not rose-colored glasses, and this is not some kind of blind optimism. This is just admitting to yourself humbly that you don't know, that there are way too many variables at play, and so there's not really a reason to think that it's all doom and gloom or think that we're headed towards doom. This is why when you look at the p-doom, the percentage of possible doom that we see in many AI discussions, the numbers are all over the place because there are so many possible ways things will go. So if we want to change that towards a better direction, if we want to give ourselves more reason to believe in a more positive future, that means we need to take action. We need to be having more of these discussions. We need to be sharing our opinions on these matters, and I encourage you to share this video as well if you feel this has been valuable to you. Now, I want to also encourage you to make your own graphs and depictions. Graphs and charts like these do not always paint the big picture. Obviously, we're reducing hundreds of factors into this little red line here, so I want you to ask yourself, am I being too optimistic with this? Should the line be more like this? Is it like actually doubling like this every few years or so? Is Moore's law making a comeback? Will quantum computing advance the restrictions that we have against Moore's law right now? Or is it more so that this line is increasing faster than this one? Are we actually becoming a new species? Are we becoming more informed and more wise than we've ever become before? And if you think we aren't becoming more wise, if you think we are not using our creativity and ingenuity for the betterment of the species, then I want you to ask yourself, what can you do to make a difference in that regard? This is a participatory relationship that we occupy with technology and language. Each superorganism rides alongside the other, and the more conscious and responsible we are with our relationships with these superorganisms, the better results we'll see. Now, there's one last factor at play here: pressure. You've likely heard the phrase, pressure creates diamonds, and necessity is the mother of invention. I like to interpret this as saying pressure creates creativity, innovation, and solutions. Thus far, we've managed to find solutions to all the problems that nature and technology have thrown at us. We made quite a mess for ourselves and the rest of the world, but the proposed answers for the problems are there. Talk with your local governance, make a charity, form a community garden, go to school, and discover new medical and ecological breakthroughs. This is how we ride alongside our technology. Our AI systems may act as intermediaries for all of our problems. We don't have to let them make decisions for us, just use them to question our biases and find better solutions. As we talked about in my video on high intelligence leading to depression, we also have to find a solid meaning structure, a purpose in life that is inclusive and connected and aligns our skills with deep philosophy. Choose a philosophy that encourages the best version of you. For myself, this is a blend of Neoplatonism, Buddhism, and Stoicism. Take time to explore what really resonates with you and what motivates you to make change in the world and inspire others. Now I'll leave you with a little bit of homework. I want you to try and list 5 problems that you believe you can address with the skills and interests that you have now. You got this. Believe in yourself and your fellow man. Thank you for your time and attention.